So, hello everybody. It's been a long time since I've been in touch with a number of you. I actually scrolled through the participant list, and I do recognize a lot of names, but there's a lot of names I don't recognize. And so, considering that we haven't met kind of face to face because of COVID and all the lack of live conferences over the last year and a year and then some, but even going back to ed tech conferences or PSUG conferences along the way. Before I get started, I do want to mention a couple of just kind of announcements. I don't know if any of you had been at the PSUG conferences in the past, but Lisa Hall is one of the main presenters at those conferences, and she is now a Level Data employee, and she is the point person now for our real-time reports. And so, as being an enterprise reporting specialist, she really knows what PowerSchool can do within its services, and she is really building in some wonderful abilities within the real-time reporting services that Level Data has. So that's the first thing that I want to mention. The second is, I know a number of you over the last couple of years have worked with Tom Block as a business analyst and help desk support. He has decided to retire as of April 1, so he is no longer with Level Data. He's still in touch with us, but he is no longer going to be working on help desk tickets and things like that. We have hired a new business analyst or education data specialist. Her name is Nina Skinner, and she will be working with me very closely on a lot of different projects, and she will eventually be taking over the support of South Carolina districts and any help desk tickets you have. So she's going to be working with you on different issues as we go along, and I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned those kind of personnel changes at Level Data. So what I'm going to be going over today are a number of some new reports and even some existing reports that we have within the real-time reports. And one of them, Wyatt actually mentioned, and it kind of skipped my mind because I'm not into the South Carolina servers on a day-to-day basis, is the IGP analysis. And so looking within the real-time reports, there is, and you'll see that there is an increase in the number of reports out here. And I just want to point out, the SCDE has been, very vocal over the years about, hey, can you create a report that does this? Can you help the districts to gain access to this data? And so, looking through that, we definitely are wanting to add in those things. But as individual districts, if there are things that you would like to see added in, please feel free to send me an email, and we'll work with Lisa. I'll get some answers through her, and I'll route those things. And we have a kind of a what's on deck type of a Google sheet right now that we're working from regarding either feature requests or additional reports. So the first one I want to kind of go over today, and I'll probably go over maybe about 6 or 7 of these. I don't want to take up everybody's time, is the IGP analysis. Okay. And when you run that, you have the ability of setting the academic year for it. And it's going to go through and it's going to analyze however many students you have at, whatever building you're logged into. And it's going to come along and it's going to tell, the students, and at this point, none of my students have an IGP declared. But it breaks all of the data down by gender, grade level, and race. And then the data shows up at the bottom of the screen showing, all of the students that are involved. But you have the ability of setting individual filters if you wish. Okay, and the filters that we have in place are the IGP status, has IGP, do they have a primary IGP, and do they have a locked IGP? So all of those settings that you can declare within that IGP module and those IGP screens, we have available. And if any of my students actually had those values set, you would have them listed here. And you actually have the ability, if you wanted to focus on a particular student, you'd be able to click here and go to the IGP screens directly and leave this screen kind of up and running in the background, because we'll be creating a new tab for you that has that IGP module loaded. And then when you're through, you just close that tab out, you come back and you can work with additional students. So, once you have that IGP data loaded, you'll be able to select. And since I don't have any right now, my only option is no, but there would be a no option for all of these. And you would be able to then select and find which ones you still need to work on, or people within your district still need to work on, versus who is already set. So that is one that came out last fall. But since we never really had any face-to-face meetings, that we never really had a chance to really kind of formalize it and inform everybody of its capabilities. Okay. So in addition, I'm going to take you back to the start page. we have been working very closely with the SCDE. And even though I'm going to try not to say the letters PEBT, I'm going to show you some reporting around the PEBT. Okay. So first off, and there is an actual workflow for this, and we're going to be sharing this, shortly with the district so that they know what's coming and how to actually go through this process of gathering the data. And the first step is to determine which group of students we want to analyze, which group of students we want to work with. And districts will have a variety of means. Everybody's kind of going off on their own, and some are selecting teams, some are selecting tracks, some are creating custom fields, some are using PowerSchool's learning preferences. There's a myriad of different ways of assigning kids onto those teams to determine who might be in a remote environment today, or who might be face-to-face, or who's in a hybrid situation. All of you have dealt with this already pretty much for over a year now. But I'm just going to declare and say that I have a track of A for a number of students that I want to work with. So out of my, I think, 660 students, I've got 206 that are on a particular track. And what I can do at that point, once I've selected that population, I can go into my real-time reports. And the first thing I want to do is I want to work with their PIP status. And so PIP being a very secure field, number one, not everybody, very few are going to have access to this. And as our reports roll out, we are giving advance notice so that sysadmin can set appropriate security for their districts, for their users to have or not have access to certain reports. But I'm going to start with a PIP status analysis, because I want to find all of the students that have a PIP status set to yes. And so out of this group of 651 students I have at Apple Grove, okay, I want to whittle it down to just that group that were in track A. Okay, that was my stored selection essentially. So I've whittled it down from the entire population to just that one track. And I can now say I want to find all the students that have a PIP status set to yes. I mean, it's very easy to select. And then at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that all of these students have a PIP status set to yes here. And I can export them if I wish, but for the most part, I want to make them my current selection. Okay, I'm going to make that group of students essentially my stored selection. And then I can come back into the report itself, and now I can start looking at attendance. And I'm just going to whittle it down a little bit, and I'm going to say, let's just look at some dates here in April. And instead of looking at the entire population, I had it whittled down from 650 down to 201, and now down to 126. So I'm going to run an attendance summary for just those kids that are involved here. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see that I have my students labeled out, and certain students will be mentioned only once. And we have the ability, this is something new that Lisa has worked with to be able to create. We can actually look at the lack of a record, meaning present, okay? The lack of a record can be qualified to summarize in a face-to-face environment as a student being present. Now, it's in a totally different situation if you're looking at a student that is attending remotely, because there is a virtually present code that is assigned to those students. So that's the main reason why we want you to kind of separate out the groups. We want you to look at the group that was or is virtual versus the group that might be face-to-face. All right. So we will give you a summary of all of the present codes in this case, if these kids were face-to-face, or if there was, any virtually present, in this case, I've got Alfred Allred here, who has 19 presents and 1 absent, an XA code was listed in here. Okay, for him, and that's just an invalid code that's in there. But just to be able to show that we can break down the attendance based on the different attendance codes that your schools and your districts have. So I know I just threw an awful lot at you. However, we are going to be sending out a PDF that is a workflow that's going to kind of step you through the process. Do this step 1, now do this, now secure this, then request this. And, we will lead you to the data. What you do with it regarding your PEBT is totally up to you, but we're going to help you to get access to that data in a very easy manner to be able, so that you can take proper steps with that information that you have. Okay. So that is our attendance summaries. And we have other updates to attendance details. There's 2 updates on recordings there. We also have daily attendance details. That's another new report, a school attendance summary. I mean, we have a lot of different things that are looking at attendance. And it's very similar to, I think it was the fall of 2019. I think it was at that EdTech conference that I met with Aveen Coleman, and we talked about, the need for a number of discipline reports. And so at that point in time, she relayed to me what was necessary, and we created all incidents by month, a discipline report there, and incident management where you could select a particular behavior or action and see just data that was filtered using that behavior or action. We also gave you the ability of having incidents by month for bullying, persistently dangerous incidents by month, and then truancy incidents overall, separated by month, so that if a district user or school user wanted to, they might be able to see some trends of data as they go along. So, it was certain times we focused on discipline. Now our recent focus has definitely been on attendance and working in different areas there to provide more information, because this last 14 months has really been kind of topsy-turvy with how things are being recorded, how things could or should be reported, and what the districts and what the schools and what those end users can do with that particular data. And with that in mind, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in my actual demonstration. I'm going to let you know some of the future of what we're doing at Level Data regarding real-time reporting is going to include some short videos, so that when somebody wants to know, what does this report really do? We might have a link here for a video that they can watch, and it might be like a 90-second to 120-second video, which maybe explains, how you run the report, what the report will display, and then maybe some uses for that data that's on the report. So we're looking at, and Lisa has that as one of her goals for this quarter, to start that process, to actually start creating all of those reports, all of those videos, so that we can share them out with our clients and make it a little bit easier to understand. Another thing that Lisa is going to be focusing on are these workflows, and really kind of guiding people through, so that they understand on a step-by-step basis what they need to click or how they can actually run those reports. So we're going to be providing a lot of resources to help those end users. And in many cases, I mean, there isn't much training that's really needed, because for the most part, a lot of our reports we will not request a table name or a field name or an index of any sort between tables. We try to keep all of our reports very, very easy to understand and very easy to access, very easy to manipulate and filter. So we want to continue that process, but we want to provide those videos and those PDFs as just kind of a backup in case somebody needs, and especially with turnover happening within a district, we want to make sure that any new people or people that are transitioned from one building to another truly understand what it is that they have, in front of them, what they have the ability to see. Okay. I'm going to bounce back to a particular student here because I want to show another new feature that showed up within SDVS within the last couple of weeks. I wanted to point it out. And sure, exactly when I want to demonstrate it, something doesn't want to kick, but here we go. We have an additional button here, which will actually show a map of where that child lives within that particular district. And, the pinpoint will show where the child lives. You have the ability of showing all of the schools within that district. So, if you wanted to try and find the nearest elementary school to assign, those capabilities are able within that particular map. We're also giving you the ability to identify and show the neighboring districts. So if the child just lived just out of your district, you would know what district they actually were a resident within. So we added that in about 3 or 4 weeks ago. But I wanted to make sure we mentioned that today so that everybody that is online is aware of some of the things that we're working on and some of the things that we're doing. Okay. So the next part I want to show, and this is also working off of this other server because I know I have a lot more data there to work with. Um, and this is also something that is going to be released, and we're going to be able to make this known to the South Carolina districts very soon. And that is the learning preferences. Now, PowerSchool created a learning preferences screen, but South Carolina, you guys have gone kind of above and beyond that capability to be able to, have extra questions or different types of survey things that you'd like to have made known. And so we have taken what PowerSchool has done, but we will take what South Carolina actually has, and we will have the capability of demonstrating and filtering on those pieces of information very, very soon. And so right now, the one that we have using PowerSchool's stock page is called Students Access to Technology, and including that with our address validation, where we have the capability of setting up and declaring geocodes and having them determined for students. We're having the ability now to map where students live. We can show where students within a particular school live so that you can see that on a map. We can see that pocketed out, and you could really see where all of those different neighborhoods of kids are. You could see where those outliers might live, things like that. And all of the reports that we have for mapping also work within current selection. So that group of kids that were on, I said, track A, we can whittle down. So any group of students that you want to identify in PowerSchool, you could see where they all live on a map. Maybe it's all the special ed students, maybe it's all the ESLs, maybe it's just all of the kids that are currently suspended or all the kids on the basketball, whatever group of kids you want to identify. But within this learning preferences, we go a little bit further. We're going to give you the ability of looking at the students that have access to the internet or do not have access. And in this case, I want to find all of the students that do not have internet available, not affordable, or no for some other reason. Now, rather than looking at a spreadsheet of data, which is down here, okay, the spreadsheet doesn't give you enough information. It doesn't really declare a lot. But if you can see this data on a map, it's easy to see that if you had some ability of declaring where some mobile hotspots might be able to be placed, you could service, 20 or 30 kids right here at one time. You could service these different neighborhoods, but these outliers might need some individual attention as well. So,
Al, can I interrupt you a second?
Sure.
Just as a side note, SCDE is participating in a study with the federal government for a new method of identifying students in poverty. What happens is that there is a tapestry created by the federal government using income tax returns, Medicaid applications, all the different data sources that create a map, if you will, and then a poverty estimate is generated for each person on that map based on their address. So, and then school district identification for title funding has been currently done through the census tracts, right? Now they're moving to this, or exploring moving to this new identification method based on addresses rather than the broader census tract. So validated addresses that are geocoded out to 5 or 6 decimal places are now going to be a data requirement in PowerSchool. So we're ahead of the game because we've contracted with Level Data and they pursued this service. But some of you have been less than diligent in actually participating in the address validation or incorporating those validations. This is going to move it from, well, I didn't feel like it, to now it will directly impact, or could potentially directly impact, the available of title funds and title identification longer term at the federal level. So just for what it's worth around the address validation, it's moving from a nice feature to a necessary component.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. And, in talking to districts across the country, we have heard a dozen times or more, why didn't you create this 3 months ago? Because I just spent a month and a half, trying to do all of this manually. Or I went through and I got into some other apps, or I actually bought another app that could do this. And here you're showing me that I can get this right within PowerSchool within, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. I can get access to all of that I need. And I can separate out these different groups of kids, however I want. This has really been a kind of a game changer for a number of districts across the country. And yeah, like Dan said, the need for having those, proper addresses and then getting those geocodes brought in is truly a need. And the dots all here are based on the geocodes. But to be able to actually identify a particular student based on a pinpoint here is really helpful. And you still have the ability within our reports of, maybe I want to find all of those students that do have access to the internet, but the internet access is not is bad, or who's working with dial-up versus broadband, who has inconsistent, things like that. You really can whittle down and really start looking at this data to see where some of those problem areas might be.
Hey, I have a question.
Sure.
Dan and Wyatt, this is Lyle Graham from Clarendon too. I've been on a committee with Congressman Clyburn's office, and there's a gentleman who's just recently been hired to take, his name is Jim Stritzinger. Might be messing his last name up, but he's been put in the charge of the pot of money for broadband expansion. Dan, I didn't know if it would make sense for you to reach out to him and let him know of this capability and where the districts are as a whole, because he's working on that.
Wow, that makes really good sense. Do you think you can make the connection between him, Dan, and myself?
Yeah, I think that can happen. I'll set that up.
Awesome, I appreciate it. And maybe we can do some really good work across agencies and see what that looks like. Okay.
Copy that.
Okay. So moving back to the main menu of these, if any of you have worked with me at any of the PSUG conferences, you know that I do a lot of training for high school counselors. And so credit progress demographics really is one of my favorite areas to explore. And especially as you get toward the end of the school year, you have your students that are going to be graduating. So maybe we don't want to focus on them at this point of time in the year, or come, early end of May, early June. Maybe you need to focus on your 11th graders and see who, maybe you have an opportunity before the start of the school year. If you wait until the start of the school year, you've missed an opportunity possibly for some summer school things, or maybe some online students to be able to take some things yet. So what you could do is just look at students that are in grade 11 that maybe are falling under some threshold to meet the level of being considered a senior. And at this point, and this could happen like right at the end of the year after you've done your permanently stored grades and you have all of those credits being accumulated. After all of that happens, hey, check your 11th graders. And if you have, a number of them that are under, let's say 15 credits, you've got your kids that are already not going to walk across the stage in 2022. So take advantage of that and work with them. And whether it's an alternative ed setting or whether it's some summer stuff, however you want to approach it is totally up to you. But you can easily identify those groups of kids, and then you can go into our kind of triple dots here and go to their historical grades, see what they're missing, and see what can be done to remedy their situation. And when you go into the historical grades here, it just creates another tab. And once you're through with that child, you just close the tab and you come right back to this list. So you can kind of keep this at the forefront. Or if you need, you can also, sort in ascending order, and you can find some students that are at 0 and 0. And as a counselor, and pass this along to your counselors, if they see zeros in here, chances are these are new kids that have enrolled, but haven't had their transcript grades put in yet. So there's some work that they might need to do, either, before they leave for the summer or before the start of the school year. So there's a lot of things that can be generated. A lot of things can be gleaned from these reports. But if I just look at these kids that are off track, maybe I can, I can export them out, because if I feel more confident looking at their data in Excel and I want to do filtering and sorting there, that's fine. Or I can make that group of kids the current selection here. And so those 75 kids are now my current selection. And now I can actually go and, if I'm in the middle of a term like we are right now, maybe I want to look at current grades. And so instead of, going through tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, or in the case of some of the super large districts, maybe over 1 million records at this point because of how long you've been in PowerSchool, we can focus and whittle it down to just, focusing in on 2,300 records, which will take a lot less time to generate. And I mean, we're talking 10, 15 seconds here. And these students, now we are looking, instead of that swarm chart that I was showing before, now we've got a histogram showing all of the current grades that my off-track kids have, because I'm using that current selection of 75 off-track kids. Okay. And I can use my filters here, or if I want to focus on failing grades here, I just click it, and now all of my donut charts and everything varies and changes appropriately. And for any of you that ever had the responsibility of filling out the civil rights data collection, a lot of the discipline reports and a lot of the things we do with discipline, the fact that we break things down by gender, grade level, and race is no accident. That is intentional to help you out with CRDC. So if you wanted to look at the male population within grade 11, here is that racial breakdown. And so to look at students from a discipline standpoint of those that might be have had a bullying incident or a harassment, or even looking at the courses to see what kind of AP course attendance you have or enrollments that you have, all of that is going to help out. But for these kids that are off track for graduation, these are the current failing grades for this year. And a counselor might look at this and say, well, I'm not so concerned about quarterly grades. I'm concerned about semester and year-long grades. Well, they could easily filter out and say, I want to see semester 1, semester 2, and year-long grades. Everything adjusts accordingly for them, and they can see just those store codes listed here. And if they want to start working with individual students, they can see that, for example, Nicole Anderson has 2 failures that she's currently working with, and one is chemistry, one is drawing and design. I mean, they can sort by the course and see if there's any commonality and see if there's any trends of maybe certain courses students having a problem with, or maybe teachers. And when you look through this, there's a distinct possibility that, you could see that, there are certain teachers that tend to fail more students than others, or their percentages are just way, way low. So, it really can help an end user be curious about the data that you have in PowerSchool and gain access to things that in some cases you might not have even thought of to look at. But for years and years, the phrase data-driven decision-making has been such a need and such, so professed in school districts. This allows you to do it without having to be that technological expert or that PowerSchool expert. You don't have to, I mean, enterprise reporting is fantastic, but in most cases, somebody at your level, the people that are attending this session today, you don't have the time in many cases to go through and create the different types of reports that your users need. And even if you did, in many cases, those users would, you might have the same response that I had when I was in my district of exporting data and giving it to them in some report format. And the typical response I would get is, this is great, but. And that but was always followed by, can you add this field? Now, can you compare this year to last year? Can you compare this teacher to that? Here, the users can do all that on their own. And, we also provide training for the real-time reporting. We have training the first Tuesday of every month. That's a demonstration of the service. And then on Thursday afternoons, we also have a workshop for existing districts that have the product, that just want to know, have questions, or they have concerns, or they want to know the best way to solve a problem that they have. And if there's a report that we have that will already do it, or series of reports, or if it's something that, hey, maybe it's a new request for a report that we haven't thought of yet. So we are giving opportunities for those different types of areas, those different things that are in there. Another one, we have one regarding contact tracing, and it's where you identify one student that maybe has a positive result for COVID, and you want to find all of the classes that other students have shared with that particular student. So we can identify those, and we're going to take that even further and maybe show activities that maybe have been shared with that child, or maybe transportation that may have been shared with that child. We're in the first stages of it, but our kind of version 1 of that report is available for you already. And just a lot of different areas. The short-term mobility is, typically something that somebody doesn't really search out, but can be important to a high school. And I don't think I have much test data in here, and maybe, I've only got 5 records, but you can show how many students that you have that have entered, and how many new students to the school, and how many students have transferred out. And then an actual, kind of that Venn diagram, how many of the students that entered also left within the same year. And you can use entry and exit dates here. So maybe this can help you out with your 45 and 135 day reports. You might be able to, really isolate and kind of bring it into play to see the students that you really want to see listed in here. So all of that can definitely play a role. Okay, so with whatever reports you have on here, we are constantly expanding, and in the last quarter, or in this quarter actually, so just through the month of April, we've made significant strides. We've had the opportunity to assign some more resources to working on these and to update some of the things that we had. I do know on the future, 3 particular reports are going to be of value to districts. The first is looking at course requests for Power Scheduler to make sure that students have the right number of course requests or the right number of periods selected in their request. The second is looking at test scores and being able to compare and bring up students that are meeting certain requirements or falling below a particular level. We want to give you the ability of analyzing that data. And then the third is actually being able to do an analysis of standards grades. So whether it's an elementary school where you want to find the kids that are performing below levels of expectation, or even at middle school, high school levels, if you're working with standards, we want to give you the capability of using whatever you have for a conversion scale that you want to use, and you want to find all of the students that fit a particular category and search within, groups for those kids as well. So I know I've gone through an awful lot of stuff. I'm happy that this is being recorded so that the recording can maybe be shared out. But if any of you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with me. I will, either I'll answer your question or I'll forward things on to an appropriate person to get you an answer.